Well, Sairam, I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation of inviting me to speak to you today, students, alumni, and brothers and sisters. It's a pleasure. And I'd like to begin by offering this talk to Swami and praying to him that he speak through me and that his love comes through the talk and we feel his presence and have darshan of him. I'd like to begin by telling a little bit about my first experiences with Swami, how I first came to him. And that happened in 1972. I come from a scientific family, and I was sort of grounded in the scientific method that facts and truth was made up of facts and something that you could measure, something that you could dissect and analyze. And I was also interested in scientific aspects of my life. I wondered why I was born and in such a miracle. Here I was in a cosmos that who could measure it? Who understood it? People came and left, birth and death. So I wondered about that. And I was drawn to spiritual texts, the writings of sages and saints from different traditions, and Zen masters, Zen swordsmen. I wondered, could there really be another dimension, a higher dimension than this physical sensory dimension? Could there be a spiritual dimension? But there wasn't any strong, clear evidence for a scientific mind. I thought I'd find it in psychiatry. I entered into psychiatry, became a psychiatrist, and I learned a lot about the mind, about some of the problems of the mind, depressions and anxiety disorders and thought disorder. But as much as I studied, I didn't find answers to spiritual questions. Why am I here? What's the purpose of this life? And I began asking the question, have you ever seen a miracle? After about 9 years into my practice, I began asking that question. I wanted to see if there was any concrete evidence that one could measure to show that there was an absolute, actual spiritual dimension. And so I began asking friends and family members, and people thought I may have been a little loony, but I even began asking patients, have you ever seen a miracle? And, some psychiatric patients are pretty disturbed. So what they call a delusion or a hallucination, they say is a miracle. But I was undeterred and I continued to ask, have you ever seen a miracle? I at that time, consulted a yoga teacher with an international reputation. Her name was Indra Devi. She lived right close to our home. We lived in San Diego, and right across the border in Tecate, Mexico, she had a little ranch. And so Sharon and I, my wife and I, went to see her. And we go through the front door, and there's a big picture of Sai Baba. I'd never seen him before. And I wondered who he was. And then Indra Devi couldn't stop talking about him. She showed me a picture that was materializing vibhuti. So she said there was this ash beneath the glass of the picture. And so I thought, well, I wondered about how balanced she was. But if this was true, it was really something quite extraordinary. She referred me to a few friends and who I called and talked to and found out that, yes, Sai Baba actually existed. There was a large following. He was doing miracles on a daily basis. People could see them, and he was drawing people to him and was talking about being a good person. That's as much as I found out about him. But I heard from what seemed to be reliable people. And so within 2 months, I was on a plane with Indra Devi, and we went to India. Now, my first meeting was quite unusual. We uh, came with the flight that came to Mumbai, and I heard that Sai Baba was going to be at a large stadium. He was going to be there just so people could visualize him, could see him. I'd never heard of something like that. He wasn't going to be playing a guitar or singing or anything like I'd been accustomed to. Just people would come out to see him. Maybe they would sing to him. And so I wanted to see that, and I was invited to a devotee's home on the outskirts of Mumbai. You know, it's a large city of about 17 million people. And so I was invited for little food and rest, and you know, on the way on the trip, I had heard by people that although I thought I was arranging this trip on my own, coming to see Sai Baba, they were telling me that no, he was bringing you. He had something to do with the organization of reality, and he was bringing me. I had not heard of stories like that except from psychiatric patients, actually. But these people seemed so adjusted and so nice that I just kept on going and kept on going to see Sai Baba. I didn't believe that he was bringing me. Anyways, I was at this small little apartment on the outskirts of Mumbai, a city of 17 million people, a very, very large city. And I'm getting ready to go to the stadium. I'm going down the elevator outside the door of the apartment building, and I'm going to go to a taxi stand to take a taxi to go to the stadium. And what should happen? But Sai Baba's car comes, stops in front of the apartment, and he goes into the same apartment building that I just came out of. And I was stunned. You know, I'd heard of circumstances and unusual occurrences, but this one was something so extraordinary. You know, to me, it was like going to Rome to see the Pope. And before going to the Vatican, I'm at a little coffee shop on the outskirts of Rome. I get up to leave, and in comes the Pope and sits in my chair. That's the kind of coincidence it was. It was so rare, so unusual, and it began to make me feel like, my God, could human consciousness or some consciousness be so evolved and beyond time and place that it could rearrange time and place, that it could control such vast realities as time and place, and arrange a meeting like this? Was he really bringing me to see him? You know, for that idea to dawn in the mind of a young psychiatrist is something. And I was shaken. I ran. Anyways, I found myself running, although I wasn't a devotee. I wondered why I was running. But I ran into the building, took this little elevator up to the 9th floor where he was. He was behind some walls with the devotees. And he came out. He didn't seem to pay much attention to me. He didn't look amazing. I didn't feel like there was something amazing, except this coincidence was so extraordinary. And he met and spoke with a few people, and then he left. And I ran out and I took a taxi to the stadium where I saw him. I went to Bangalore at that time. This was May 1972. The first conference in Indian spirituality was going to be going on, and Swami was inviting a number of professors from different parts of India and the world to speak, and he was going to be speaking. And in this setting, I was going to be seeing him. And one evening, he was going to be honoring a visiting professor who gave a couple of talks. And he waved his hand. He was very close to me, actually. He waved his hand in the air, and out came this large necklace, very large, and he placed it around the neck of this was honoring this person, uh, put it around the neck, and I was aghast. I was actually a little worried and frightened by it because I'd never seen a human being have control of matter and showing how the world was created by a thought or whatever it was. So I was really quite amazed by that. I went back to my hotel room and I was a little worried. I looked in the closet, I looked under the bed. I was spooked because my reality system was crumbling. I was beginning to really consider that this human being, or maybe all human beings, at an evolved state had the capacity to control matter. For a young Western scientific psychiatrist to see this and to think that matter could be controlled and created by the human was something extraordinary. It was extraordinary. And my belief system started to crumble. And that's a worrisome feeling when you think that what you thought was real isn't real. But next morning, I went to see Sai Baba. He was really sweet to me. And by this time, I was allowed close in. I was eating with him during the daytime meals. And my fear quieted down. One evening, Swami was giving a speech. And this was at the back of the old house in Vrindavan. The conference in Indian culture and spirituality was going on, and he was giving a talk, and he was just adored by people. And of course, I was starting to like him also. But I didn't consider him a divine being yet, but he was something really extraordinary. So at the end of the talk, I sort of retreated to the inner part of the house. He was in the backyard. There was about 500 to 700 people, maybe close to 1,000. And they were, of course, singing to him and loving him. But I had, been to India now a few, maybe over a week, and the food and the hours and whatnot were getting to me, and I was getting a little bit edgy. And I thought, I don't know if I can take too much of this. I'm thinking I may even have to go home early because it was tiring me. And I'm standing there sort of dejected, looking at a little lizard on the wall. It's climbing on the wall. And around the corner of an opening comes Swami, looking at me with this twinkle, and he came up to me and gave me 2 little pieces of chocolate, of candy, and he said, sweets, eat. And I had this feeling that he could sense the suffering or the problems of a person and respond to them. Here I had seen what I thought that human consciousness could be beyond time and space and control time and space. I saw that consciousness could create matter. And not only that, it was responding. It could sense the pain and suffering of people and respond. I became a devotee on the spot. I giggled like a little puppy dog, and I was slain. One day after that, I was sitting by myself at the ashram, and I was thinking, my God, what I'm seeing here is more real than the laws of physics. I was thinking like that. And I felt a rustling in front, and I opened my eyes, and there was Swami sort of standing and weaving back and forth and in ecstasy. Could he be listening to my thoughts and responding and giving me confidence? Yes, this is more real than the laws of physics. Those were the first experiences I had with Swami, and it completely melted my mind and made me a devotee. Now, I'd like to tell you an incident that happened with me and Swami that was probably the most meaningful to me. Now, I've had many, many interviews with Swami, experiences with Swami that led me to believe deeply, more than believe, experience that he is beyond time and space and all love and responds to us. And like one time, we were in an interview with Swami, my wife and 4 daughters and myself, and one of my daughters said, Swami, how can we get closer? And Swami said, you have to talk to me all the time and give me your pain. And I was beginning to think that, yes, our consciousness has to be attached to him. He's the highest reality that I know, and we have to learn how to give him our pain. And what a transaction that is, that we can give Swami our pain, and he can take our pain and give us bliss and love. What an interchange is that? What a beautiful, wonderful experience of the deepest vision into reality is that beyond a mindless, senseless, unconscious universe made up of molecules dancing around, there is a consciousness of pure love that responds to us and loves us and can bring us to him and raise our consciousness. Wow. If we really believe that, if that really becomes an ingrained experience, that is a transformation. I'm going to tell you a story which is leading me to understand the path to this transformation a little better. After I wrote my first book about Sai Baba, and I gave it to him on his birthday in 1975, he told me that he was pleased, and I was very, very happy. And he told me that he would come into my practice as a psychiatrist. And I wondered what that would be like. Would I learn something new about values that fashioned our mind and our consciousness? Satya Dharma Shanti Prema Ahimsa. By that time, I knew Swami's teaching about values. I don't know if I knew them as deeply as he was teaching, as was reality. But I thought, well, maybe that was what he meant, that I would understand more deeply the meaning of the values and how they are expressed in psychiatry and how they could be adapted in psychiatric practice. So that's how I felt. About that time, I was referred a patient who was in the intensive care unit at Mercy Hospital where I was practicing. So I met this young lady, and she had this terrible headache and seizure disorder. A headache and seizure disorder, thought to be psychogenic. She was studied by neurologists and neurosurgeons for quite a while now. She would have these terrible, painful headaches that would drive her to suicidal feelings, and it was unbearable for her. And she would have seizures. But they began to think that these seizures and this disorder was caused by psychological ailment, which was manifesting physically. When she would have seizures, she would have normal EEG, brainwave tests. About 1981, she was referred to the neurosurgical unit at the University of California, San Diego, where I also had taught and had a position. And they wanted to do a brain biopsy to see what was the problem. And so she wanted me to be in the room with her. And so I remember that distinctly. We were in the surgical room. They opened up her skull and opened the bone and took a little snippet of brain tissue and analyzed it, and came back that it was rather minimal to moderate vasculitis, nondescript, not thought to be the cause of such a widespread psychological infirmity. She was in the hospital at that time. I went to visit her, and she said Sai Baba was visiting her. I thought that was unusual, and she said he was chanting a strange chant. And I said, well, can you remember it? She said, I think I can. I said, well, can you repeat it? And so she began to repeat the Gayatri mantra. Here is a young Western woman, just barely 30, knew nothing about Sanskrit and very little about India, except that it existed. And here she was beginning to chant the Gayatri, haltingly, Om Bhur Bhuva Suvaha, but haltingly. But I knew it was the Gayatri. I said, well, how do you know that? How can you remember it? Because this was a few days ago or a day ago when this happened to you. She said, no, it's not like you think. Sai Baba was chanting, but he wasn't chanting it with his mouth. He was chanting with his heart. It came out of his heart and it went into my heart. And I'm just listening to it now and repeating it to you. Extraordinary. She got a little better, left treatment for a couple of years. And then one day she called and she said, Sai Baba is visiting me and he's chanting again. And I said, can you remember what he's saying? And she said, I think I can. Could you write it down? I think I can. At that time, I thought that she was just trying to manipulate me to get my attention. She knew that I was interested in Sai Baba, so maybe she was trying to get my attention. But then, and then I said, well, listen, if it happens again, then just call my answering machine. If it happens at night, don't wake me up. Don't call my home. Call my answering machine and chant and translate it if you can. And then a couple of days later, I'm picking up my calls, and there she is, chanting Sanskrit. So my patient, Jackie, came to the office with 3 messages that she had retrieved and had written down and translated. And I had a video man there who recorded us. And we had a long conversation and we analyzed the 3 messages. And I understood that this actually was a real phenomena. That she said that Swami was coming to her, telling her these messages and telling her to tell me. So what to make of this? An extraordinary situation in which a young Western patient with no background in Sanskrit or India begins to retrieve messages like this. I've never heard of anything like it. I've heard of revelations. A revelation is when God transmits messages. For instance, the Vedas were recovered by rishis through revelation. Muhammad retrieved the Quran through Angel Gabriel. That was considered a revelation. Moses received the 10 Commandments and the 5 books of Moses, which are considered the Torah in Judaism, by revelation. But what was this? I know that in the Sai organization, I've had a little bit of problem trying to describe the greatness of this because it really is great. And if one listens to these messages, they'll understand something very profound. But because Swami has talked so much about being very careful and watchful of mediums, people that claim that Swami has entered into them and they have the right to tell others about themselves and give advice, which is completely wrong. These messages are of a different nature And it takes a little while to describe it, but I think in brief, they're talking only about Advaitic reality and describing some problems in our current day that has to do with the assault on truth by non-truth, which we see almost all over the world and causing complete havoc, people believing misinformation and non-truth. But also in our own organization, there are issues, truth versus non-truth, which I won't get into too much now because it causes too much havoc. But these messages were about that, given in 1983 for the current time. And when I saw the remarkable transmission and understood that this was something extraordinarily rare and very deep and beautiful, I began to record it. I recorded it on video, so I had to learn something about video recording. I recorded 11 hours over 2 months. During this period, Vibhuti and Amrita appeared. And extraordinary situations which are too complicated and long to describe in depth here. But just in brief, it was extraordinary sort of transmission of material. When it was done on Guru Purnima, 1983, I went directly to Swami to ask him about it for a number of reasons. One, that it, of course, we would go to Swami immediately if something of this nature happened. He said that the vibhuti that appeared was his. And when asked about the Sanskrit, he said it wasn't pure Sanskrit. It was Sanskrit in 5 different levels of transmission. Sanskrit and pure Sanskrit is mantra. The pure Sanskrit received by the rishis, mantra. But when it becomes a language, a vernacular, and Swami used the word vernacular, when it becomes a vernacular, it loses some of its potency. So it wasn't pure Sanskrit, he said. There are other languages also. There was Pali from the Pali Canon, Buddhist. Amitabha, Buddha of Light, was mentioned a number of times in this transmission. And it was an extraordinary gift from Swami, actually. Swami told me to put it aside and not get too involved at this point. And that's exactly what I did. Could I treat the patient? Yes, but don't get too close. When this was happening, I wondered, well, what is it? Do I have to protect this patient? Do I have to bring her actually into my own home to protect her? And my wife didn't like that idea whatsoever. So that was a little tense, and Swami calmed that right down. No, stay a little distant. You keep the messages at this point afar. Don't get too much wrapped up in it. You can treat her, but not too close. And so that's what happened. She got a little better and left. She left the treatment. In about 2006, when I retired, I thought to get back to these messages. They were so interesting. It took me a great deal of effort to do that because I had to find them. They were now in the storage, so I had to find the storage place and dust them off. This was 25 years had gone by, or a little bit more. And the recording material, the recording apparatus was outdated, and I had to find a place, only one place in the all USA, and I searched all over, understood this recorder and could fix it for me. Then I had to learn how to bring the tapes alive. These tapes had been dormant for over 25 years, and this kind of material evaporates or is destroyed, over time. And so it took some time to bring these messages, these tapes alive so that we could work with them. I had to work with a an editor. I had to learn how to edit myself. And so it was a big trouble. And then I had to find a Sanskrit scholar. And, there are miracles involved in each one of these steps, too deep and complicated to express right now. But I found extraordinary one. I called the Vedanta Society and I said, who's the best Sanskritist around? And they said, well, this Thanishwar Timalsina, University of California, San Diego. And they said you'd have trouble getting him. So I gave a call, got him on the first ring. He said, come on over. He became friends and he helped me translate in depth each one of the 14 messages, and went to a university in Germany to get a PhD. Taught at school, so we understood how to teach Westerners. So he was a perfect person. And you'll see, I'm going to play a little clip later, and you'll see him talking about these messages and how beyond what he'd ever seen. Very, very interesting. We presented at the American Psychiatric Association annual meetings twice, 2013, 2015. He helped the understanding of these messages at a very deep level. Now, I'm going to just quickly and briefly go through the first 3 messages, maybe a couple of others, just to let you know how profound these messages are and worthwhile. I've done over 100 videos and put them on my blog and on Facebook. And then I've collected them into 16 videos, which I call a digital book, because if you go through them from 1 to 16 in sequence, it will unfold like a book, and you'll see the beginnings of it, and you'll see all the translations and all of that. And I'll put a link down so that you can find this video book. So message number 1, very briefly, it starts by saying, "O believer," and a believer here means one who is believing in the Vedas, one who has experienced themselves not only as the body, but beyond body, something more subtle than the body. Believer who is the embodiment of divinity. Now, we've heard Swami say this many times. I was rather, I don't know if you call it shock, but I was rather interested when I heard that this is how it opens up. O believer, embodiments of divinity. I am Para Brahman. Now, who gets a letter or a message like that? Who can ever find a message like that? O believer, I am Para Brahman. For some of us who have been around Swami and who knows Swami's teachings, Para Brahman is the highest of the high, full, infinite, supreme consciousness, beyond name, beyond form, beyond place, beyond birth, beyond death, beyond attribute. It makes you think of Swami saying everything is nothing and nothing is everything. Because out of this seemingly beyond attribute, everything was created, and all of consciousness, all of the aspects of consciousness, any place, anywhere, reside in Para Brahman. This is Para Brahman, non-dual, the creator of duality. I am Para Brahman. The next line, which is the third line in this first message, is Dandempa Dempa Satya. The 2 Sanskrit scholars who were professors, well experienced, they didn't know what it meant. And I finally found it after Googling it many, many times. I found it. It's the same thing as Para Brahman. Absolute reality, absolute truth. is there an absolute beyond all of the ephemeral comings and goings and the impermanence of the world? Well, Swami's Vibhuti proves it to us. When everything transient and impermanent is burned away, there is something left which cannot be reduced anymore and is the absolute behind the many, the one behind the many. That's one of the explanations for Vibhuti. So the Dempai Dempa, that comes from Tibetan Buddhism. That's a Tibetan Buddhism, Vajrayana Buddhism. You know, there's Theravada, there's Mahayana, and there's Vajrayana, Tibetan Buddhism. And so then it says, you can perceive me through creation. That's how it is ending. You can perceive me through creation, and divinity can manifest itself in any way that it wishes or that it wills. Swami has said, I will come to you in the way you think of me. You, in so many ways, we can think of him and he can come in any way. And Swami says, I've given you your entire life as the path to overcome the separation and the impermanence and to find the higher reality. Everybody's path seems to be different, but there's the same in all. So that's message number one, so extraordinary. Message number two, it says, Swami is Parabrahman and is our teacher. It sort of blows you away if you think about it. Swami is Parabrahman. Of course, we know that. We sing to him, you're Rama, you're Krishna, you're beyond, you're Narayan, you're everything. You're the totality. You are beyond time and space. And that's what this message says. Swami is Parabrahman, who is leading us in a yajna for the purification of our wisdom. And that's what we're going through right now, through the ups and downs. We're going through the purification of our wisdom. And it's important to understand that what's going on in the world today, in our life today, is actually controlled completely by Swami. And we're going through a transformation from the Kali Yuga to the Satya Yuga. We're overcoming the impermanence to find the absolute reality. And the third message says, I am Anahata Sabda. What is Anahata Sabda? Anahata Sabda is the voice of God in the Sikh religion. It is a non-beating sound. It is Advaitic. It is that creates the sound that you can hear in the dual world. It is the precursor of sound. It is the voice of God. I am the voice of God. And then it says, I am Daivi Prakriti. Daivi Prakriti is the primal motivating force of all of creation. It is love that holds the whole universe and universes in balance. Daivi Prakriti. And it is luminous. For those that can see, it's of luminous nature. It is charity of love, immortal. It is a force that once we find it and hold on to it and hold on to this love, it leads us to realization. And the Swami says, love is Satya Dharma Shanti Prema Ahimsa. Well, the messages go on to describe Swami as different aspects of divinity. In message 4, the message describes Swami as Amitabha, Buddha of light. This Buddha of light is described in Mahayana and Vajrayana Buddhism. Amitabha is a celestial Buddha who is not living on earth, but is a celestial Buddha who emits what's called termas, or hidden messages in mind field that is received in the future by a devotee called a kirtan. That's a little complicated. I won't get into that, but Amitabh is considered another name for Parabrahma and Satya Sai. I'll go right now to message 11, which is a very unusual message. And in this message, it starts like this. Jackie, the patient, came in for an interview. And during that interview, we discuss message 10, which preceded. She started by saying, I think something's going to happen. A very profound event will happen today. And we couldn't figure out what it was. So she left. And this unusual event happened. Now, this is hard to understand, and it may take going through the messages in depth to understand it, but I'll relate it. Jackie was very poor. She needed federal assistance for food stamps and money in order to live, because she would get ill so quickly, so frequently, and have to be hospitalized so frequently that she couldn't hold a job. And sometimes her son had to go to relatives. She couldn't take care of her son. So she was walking to the bus stop. She was waiting at the bus stop. And a black Mercedes car drove up. Somebody jumped out and attacked her. Now, this sounds really strange, but stay with me here. Attacked her, pulled her cross from her neck and threw it into the dust. And she managed to get away and run to the office. She scribbled down a note quickly and was in abject terror. I have this on tape. She is so frightened. I've been a very active psychiatrist for many, many years, over 40 years, and I've never seen anybody in this deep terror. And we quieted her down and took a look at the scribbles that she had made. And then she reported that there was a dark force in the form of a physical body that was called a left-hand teacher, or a teacher of an alternate path, that was creating a fearful reality. A really profound message. I didn't know what it meant when it happened, when she was so fearful in 1983. And later, when I interviewed her in 2008, because I interviewed her one more time after having not seen her for quite a while, still I didn't know what it meant. And this left-hand teacher in the physical body is Asat, non-truth, Mahamaya. And she said these words and many other Sanskrit-related words, very complicated, beyond my knowledge. This is a very terrible dark force that is spreading a fearful reality, and you must counter it. Now, why wasn't she just talking about the event that just happened? Because in this message and in the ones that follow, 6 more times, or a total of 6, she mentions this left-hand teacher. And both I and the Sanskritist and Jackie knew that she was receiving a message of something very frightening that needed to be countered, that was way beyond this event at the bus stop. Although this event at the bus stop concretized for us the threat. I drove Jackie home because she was so frightened, and I stopped at the bus stop and we found her cross, dusted it off and gave it back to her. You know, symbolic almost of that devotees who protect Dharma have to dust off a threat to Dharma and set it right, help set it right, because it's beyond us. I remember in the year 2000, my wife and I were sitting with Swami, and I said, Swami, are you bringing the evil out of the world with more and more power so that we can become aware of it and overcome it. I was thinking of baby Krishna that fought the demons because the demons were attracted and he could overcome them once we see. And Shiva, who is working with the ocean, churning the ocean and taking the poison out of the ocean. Swami, are you doing this with more and more power so we can be aware and overcome? And Swami says, it's not my power that's doing it. This is my nature. It's his nature to clean our ego. In message 9, it says, mind power, the mental principle, is all ego and not real. Brahman is the basis of the world. Very profound. All of the creation that seems impermanent, there is an absolute reality at the basis, and that is Brahman. And some people can see Brahman all the time. That's illuminated mind. I said to Swami, because Swami was giving some lectures on this topic, Swami, would you give me illuminated mind? And he looked at me with a smile and said, get your daughters married. He brought me right back to earth. But Swami is almost promising us, I am your teacher leading you in a yajna for purification of wisdom. That's what the whole purpose of this, going from the Kali to the Satya Yuga. Hold on. This is the time to hold on with all our might. And it is purity, the purity that is essential. One time, I and my wife and 4 daughters were with Swami, and one of our daughters asked Swami, Swami, how can I get closer? And he said, you have to talk to me all the time. Who of us can hold on to Swami so that we never forget? We're always holding to him. And give me your pain. Swami has come to take all the pain and give us absolute bliss, the bliss of Brahman, Brahmananda. He's come to give us this. It's unimaginable, beyond our wildest dream, that's actually what we're doing with Swami. Hold on, because he's bringing us to this reality. The rest of the messages 12 through 14 describe the kind of wisdom, purified wisdom, required to bring unity in the seeming diversity, the kind of wisdom needed that we need to rise into to overcome the upheaval that has brought so much suffering and pain into the world. And I'm going to play you right now message 14. My last post that I posted about the 14 messages, which talks about our responsibility in upholding Dharma, not shirking, not running away, because the teaching is not to hide from it. It's to look at it and stand up strong and know that Swami will protect us. It says that the way we uphold Dharma and the courage and the forbearance and the purity and the perseverance and the patience that we have in upholding Dharma is reflected into the inner world as wisdom, into our inner world as wisdom. And wisdom is reflected in the outer world as peace. So they're linked. The inner and the outer are linked. And that's something that we have to grow into, that we're responsible for upholding Dharma. That is translated into wisdom, and that wisdom is translated into the Satya Yuga. And now I'm going to play this 14th message for you.
Pranam svikar karo Sai Mahadeva. Pranam svikar karo Sai Mahadeva.
In the last post, we began analyzing message 14, beginning, Believer, I am the Buddha. It goes on to say that the teacher is divine wisdom, absolute truth. This paragraph also indicates that there is a purification process that empties the mind to reveal compassion, love. As I understand, absolute truth in Mahayana Buddhism is emptiness, non-attachment, similar to the Advaitic path to non-attachment, the Advaitic practice of neti, neti, neti. Not this, not this, not this. Not holding on to anything. This path entails not holding to bodies and feelings, names and forms, being empty of attachments. Being free of attachment reveals love. Continuation of message 14. The male principle time and the female principle wisdom constitute the ritual knowledge. Both time and wisdom are for the sacrifice of ego through absolute devotion. This is the brilliant sun to dispel darkness and leads to the awakening. Message 14 says that this is the time for the sacrifice of ego mind, as Swami teaches. What man has to achieve primarily is the purification and final annihilation of the Antakarana, inner instrument. The whole world, along with its joys and sorrows, vices and virtues, truth and untruth, justice and injustice, etc., is in the mind only. Satya Sai Baba. Understanding that Sai is the doer is not a teaching of non-action, as seen in the teaching of Krishna to Arjuna in the middle of a battlefield. It's a teaching that no matter what, we understand that all is God's play, while still understanding that we must act to uphold Dharma with all our might. As an offering to Sai, the same can be said of Swami's teaching, love all, serve all. In my opinion, many devotees misunderstand the meaning of love taught by Sai, love all, serve all. Love does not mean accepting bad behavior. It means loving God by loving and protecting Dharma. Some understand love all as accepting all, in contrast to tough love that means enforcing rules. Love administered to a wayward youth might mean a stern upholding of rules. Tough love in protecting Dharma can mean follow the Father, face the devil, fight to the end, finish the game. Here is Professor Timal Sina describing the meaning of the messages and that they are action-oriented.
It's conceptually mind-boggling. There are two things clearly said in these texts. One is the philosophical goal, which is a sort of recognition of the self, which is almost used synonymously. Three terms: the Parabrahman, the Buddha of light, and Sai Baba. Number one, the text is non-dual. Number two, when it has to describe the truth, the reality, it uses Parabrahman, Sat, or the Buddha of light. And the third thing is it gives you a moral imperative. The text repeatedly talks about yajna, vidya, and so there is the urge to act. So the text is not a passive Vedanta like the early models of understanding Vedanta. The text integrates karma and yajna in process of realization. So this is not really the any of the original schools of philosophy. There's like because karma and yajna are not essential to the self-realization in the Sankaraji school of Advaita, and this text mostly resembles some of the Neo-Vedanta teachings. I would say mostly maybe the Sai Baba's teachings itself, or the other contemporary people like studying Vivekananda. So those kind of people, contemporary people who are more active and service oriented and still follow that non-dual philosophy. So there is a sort of spiritual activism inside these messages, which I read as very meaningful.
Swami represents all creation and beyond, and Madhu dividing represents ego mind that causes suffering and must be countered. Swami is ready to give us a higher wisdom that transcends separate names and forms. Absolute devotion to absolute purity is needed to attain eternal divine consciousness. Remember, unity, purity, divinity. That's the highest wisdom, God. Here is Satya Sai Baba inviting us to merge in Him. Here Swami tells us how important is this time, not only for preparation for the Satya Yuga, but for the attainment of the wisdom of oneness, for merging back into Him. In a letter to his students, Swami wrote, "My dear children, awake, awake, awake. There is no time for slumber. You have been asleep and dreaming for thousands of lifetimes. If you do not awaken now, this chance may not come again for thousands more. Come with me. Separation is no longer the order of the day. I separated myself from myself so that I could love myself more. The experience is finished. I want all of myself to return and merge into me, the only one." A comment for clarity. Sai is saying here that the experience of separation is finished, and Sai wants all separate names and forms to merge back into the one. This is the time for attaining the wisdom of oneness that the miraculous messages describe, the wisdom that counters the frustrating search for love and peace in a form other than in one's own self. Here is a statement by a former student relating how easy it is for us to forget the extraordinary grace that Swami is giving. Let us not forget.
Purely my grace and grace alone, that each one of you souls have come to me. Not one of you in front of me deserve 1 second of being with Swami. Not one of you deserve. What it is, I am conferring a boon upon you which is 1,000,000,000 times more than any of you deserve. Then of course he looked a little sad and he says, not one of you are making even 1,000,000th the best of it.
The last portion of message 14 reads, "The age is the expression or reflection of its wisdom, and wisdom is the expression or reflection of the age. This is the truth." A comment. The phrase, The age is the expression or reflection of its wisdom, and wisdom is the expression or reflection of the age. Is Sai Baba's teaching of reaction, reflection, resound. This means that the outer world is a reflection of our inner wisdom, and the way we uphold Dharma in the outer world, especially countering adharma, purifies inner wisdom. The inner and outer are linked. This is the truth.
प्रणाम स्वीकार करो साईं महादेवा प्रणाम स्वीकार करो साईं महादेवा प्रणाम स्वीकार करो साईं महादेवा साई महादेवा साई महादेवा साई महादेवा साई महादेवा साई महादेवा साई महादेवा.
I'd like to end this talk today by telling you a story about the bumps and jumps, the ups and downs on the spiritual path that I've experienced with Swami, and how that helps tame the monkey mind and helps us understand that Swami is the doer. In March of 1988, I came to visit Swami in Vrindavan. And while there, a woman with the Russian translation of the first book that I wrote, Sai Baba, the Holy Man and the Psychiatrist, gave me the book and said that it would be nice if this book was printed in Russia. So here I had a Russian translation, and I had an interview with Swami and began to talk to him about the book and told him about the translation. Could I go to Russia, I asked, and find a publisher and have the book published in Russia? He said, you can go to Chicago. So go to Chicago. I wondered where that came from. Later, I found that the translator of the book was from the University of Chicago. She lived in Chicago. But I thought that I knew more about this and said, but Swami, it would be better if I went to Russia. I could find a publisher and have the book published in Russia. It would be easier, thinking that I knew more than Swami about the subject. Actually, I knew I didn't, but I said it anyways. And so Swami said, well, then go. And I said, when, Swami? And so he said, why wait? So he sent me on my way for this experience and this lesson in smashing the mind. What was I to do? I knew nothing about Russia. I didn't know how to get to Russia. I didn't know any connections in Russia. So I began to call around, and I found out that I couldn't make any worthwhile contact. But by some unusual coincidence, and we understand how that works with Swami, I found a woman by the name of Rama. She took on this name Rama. And she was interested in doing Russian-American interchange and relationship. And so she said, yes, I knew a lot of people there, and they'd be interested in your book. And I know some contacts. So join me in my next trip. And so off Sharon and I, my wife Sharon and I, went with her in October 1988. And I didn't know what to expect, but I was just full of fire and interest, and it was an exciting trip. So off we went, and we ended up in Moscow. The first day we visited a department of psychology. And this, I was thinking that I was going to be talking to an editor of their journal and talking about the book, and that it would be nice to have it printed, how to print it in Russia. But no, he said, we're expecting you, perhaps you can give a talk to our whole group. You know, there are about 30, 40 people here. They're interested in hearing your story and hearing about your book. So why don't you give us a talk? And so I was a little nervous about that, having about 5 minutes to prepare. But and I walked into the group and gave them a talk about Swami and about my experiences with him. And they were interested. They began talking about some of their research that they were doing. You know, the Russians were interested in paranormal phenomena. So when I started talking about miracles, and they were interested. And then I talked to them about Swami. You know, they were saying, well, maybe we could try to understand this better in the future with computers and with data and with statistics. And I said, they said, well, maybe you have something to say about that. And I said, well, Swami tells us that the best way to find out about this spiritual dimension and understand it is through love. And they liked that idea. We had a little discussion, and most of them wanted to come see Swami. So there was a long list of psychologists that wanted to see Swami. About a day or two later, we were at the largest psychoanalytic school in Moscow on Arbat Street. And so I go to this school with my wife and Rama, and then again I'm invited to speak to a large room of psychiatrists. And I thought, well, this can't be any worse than last time. And so I started talking about Swami. And I knew they were interested in paranormal phenomena, and I started talking about miracles. And then I said something, extraordinary. The stories that I've heard, that I've seen myself, Swami has turned into different forms of divinity. I knew that Jack Hislop had seen him turn into Krishna, that Kasturi, both of these have become friends of mine. Kasturi told me that he saw Swami turn into Shiva. And I've talked to people one person who said he saw Swami turn into Ganesha. So I told them stories like that, and that he'd been in two or more places at once. He could speak all languages. And then I said, it's something to be with somebody who knows everything. And when I said that, I thought to myself, well, what? These are a group of psychiatrists. They're asking good questions. They're asking me, what evidence do I have that these phenomena actually occurred? And I'm telling them that I know somebody who knows everything. That means everything. He knows all the languages. He knows all equations. He knows all physics. He knows all everything about the universe. He knows everything. They must think I'm a little loony. Then I looked over at my wife, and she was smiling at me, and so that quieted me down. But I was a little nervous saying such a thing, that Swami knows everything. He never told me that he knew everything. I remember reading that he told somebody that he knew everything, but he never told me, and that's a huge something to say. Swami knows everything. Anyways, even though I made a few faux pas, many people were interested in coming to see Swami. So we added to the list of names. There was a great number of psychologists, psychiatrists wanted to see Swami. I tried to call the ashram from Moscow. I didn't have much luck. So that trip ended. And then within a few months, actually in January of 1989, Sharon and I took a trip to see Swami. And I thought he'd be interested. Here were a lot of Russian scientists interested in seeing him. And I sort of puffed myself up and thought that, I'd done a good job. But Swami didn't want to see me. Evidently, he didn't see me. And here I was sitting on the porch of the veranda, next to the temple door. And finally came down to the last day, and I knew how Swami waits until the last minute. And so I waited there expectantly. And yes, he started to take in Americans and some of my friends. And then the door closed and no me. And I was going to be leaving, within another couple of hours. That was my last chance. And I was really pretty dejected. I'd waited a long time now. I'd been there for 2 weeks. And waited expectantly, thought the Swami was going to speak to me, but he didn't. And the door closed. But then the door opened and Swami looked at me with a twinkle and he said, "Come on in." So I was saved for a second. And I went in. And then Swami saw some people in the closed room, and then he invited me in, and I just dropped to his feet and tears came. And I'm kissing his feet. And Swami said, no, don't worry. They were just intellectually interested in Swami. I said, "Swami, I don't care to go and bring any more Russians or Americans or anything. I just want to be with you, and I just want to please you." He said, "Well, if there is just one person in Russia that really wants to see me from the heart, and it doesn't have to be a psychiatrist, psychologist, doesn't have to have any money, can be poor, can be a beggar, can be anybody, but they have real love for Swami from the heart, you can go to Russia and take that person, bring them to me." I said, "Well, why would I want to do that? I mean, from my point of view, why would I want to go to Russia and take a poor person who has love for Swami to come to see Swami?" But that's the difference between my mind and his mind. And he's changing all our minds to his mind. That's what he's doing. So I felt just to drop that, and I felt comfortable dropping that. About 7 months later, in September, August of 89, I took another trip to Swami with my wife. And first day, I'm sitting on the veranda, and Swami calls me up, and I rush up to him, I drop to my knees, and Swami says, "How are the Russians? Or where are the Russians?" And I said, "Swami, the Russians are in Russia." And that was that. So he sent me back. The next day, he took me for a car ride. And he said, "Sandwise, how are the Russians?" And I said, "I don't know, Swami. You told me that I wasn't to bring them. I wasn't to go there. I don't know." The next day, Swami called me up again. I'm sitting on the veranda. He calls me up to him and he said, "How are the Russians?" I said, "Swami, do you want me to bring the Russians?" He said, "Yes." Now, you have to go through this play with me to see how Swami can twist the mind around. We can't understand him sometimes, all the time. He's very difficult to understand. And he makes us reel in this monkey mind of ours and begin to recognize that he's the doer. Let's just play the game with him. Just do what he's going to do. I says, "Okay, I'll do my best." He said, "I'll tell you when." And before we left, Swami had me in and he said, "Bring them Guru Purnima next year." Fine, July 1990 to bring them to him. So during that time, I contacted the Russians again, developed a relationship again. A number of Russian psychiatrists were coming to San Francisco. They were going to be giving a presentation on PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, in Russian soldiers fighting in Afghanistan. And so they're going to give a presentation. They say, yeah, we'd love to meet you there. So Sharon and I took a trip to San Francisco. That was all fun. Met with them. They were really eager. Met the Russian translator who was working with them, an American, Carolyn, who had translated for the Gorbachevs when they met with the Reagans, was a good translator, a lot of experience, really adept, and she was very eager. She would even be willing to pay her way. So fine. We had a wonderful translator. We had set up the situation. I said I'd come to Moscow one more time, and we would solidify situation. I'd tell them what to expect, what kind of behavior and all for the ashram. No drinking, and things like that. So the day came when we left for India. My wife, 4 daughters, Carolyn was going to be meeting us on the way, the translator. We came to the ashram. We were so high and excited. We rented a little bus, went on the bus all the way to the ashram, and we were given rooms for the Russians, and we were going to set up the room with little candies and paper, newspapers that would be delivered, and we cleaned the room and made everything so pretty and nice, and we would meet every night. And so the day came, and I was going to be going to Delhi. Well, in the morning, I'm sitting on the veranda, and Swami calls me up, and he says, "Are you going today?" I said, "Yes." He said, "You can meet them in Bangalore." Now, I had set it up so that I was going to meet them off the plane in Delhi. I had met Sai devotees from Delhi who were going to help arrange for food and for accommodation and things while we were in Delhi, and take care of the Russians in a really nice way. And I was ready to go. And then Swami tells me, well, you can meet them in Bangalore. Well, what was that? Another sort of blow to my mind. I went back to the room, and Sharon told me that on her way back to the room, she passed this one little phone station at Prashanti, and she heard that somebody was ringing the telephone and asking for Dr. Sandweiss. So she poked her head in and said, "Who is it?" "They're the Russians from Russia." So she talked to them, and they said they didn't know if they could make it because of visa problems, but let's be in touch, and they're still going to try. Okay. So that was the situation. I went to the airport, got to Delhi. It was a really difficult time, trying to call Russia from Delhi, rushing around. I called this trip rushing around for nothing, rushing around for nothing. And I must have called 50, 60 times. Because I tried to be in touch with them. I tried to see what's happening moment by moment. And it was hard to get from Delhi to Moscow. Sometimes I would talk to the operator. "Can you make the connection?" "No, it's very hard. Cannot make it at this time." I said, "Are you sure?" They said, "Yes, I'm sure." And at one time I was so foggy, I said, "Are you surer than sure?" And they said, "Sir, please don't waste my time." Click. That was the end of that phone call. Anyways, I was really depleted at the end of the couple of days, struggling with phone calls and wondering and feeling stressed and pressured. And finally, the last day came, last phone call at about 6:00 at night, and no, they couldn't make it. And so I just fell in bed. I was too tired to even cry. So next day, I went to the airport and found out that I hadn't confirmed my ticket. I might not be able to go. I didn't have enough energy in me to fight. I just sat there and they said, sir, yes, you can go. So I limped back to the ashram. It was Guru Purnima. I came back onto the grounds and Swami was in the Purna Chandra and he was giving a talk. And I just looked at him and I just felt so sweet, so wonderful, so safe. And I found out that later that Swami had come up to somebody, one of the officers, and asked to wear a sandweiss. And the person didn't know, of course. But I felt so good that he was thinking of me. And went back to the room. I was taken care of by my wife and daughters. They made me mashed potatoes and they fanned me and they took care of me. They said nice things to me. I was really completely depleted. You know, one time I was with Swami later on. This was an interview later on in the year 2000. This was 1990. I'm telling you about 1990 right now. But in the year 2000, we were in an interview just before Swami's birthday. And I was asking, I think I told you the story. I was asking for illuminated mind. And Swami told me to get my daughters married. And then he said to me, you know, everything's coming out of Sandweiss. And when everything comes out, and he took my pocket, opened my pocket up, he says, Swami jumps in. When everything comes out of Sandweiss. And of course, I felt at this time pretty depleted. I came back to the ashram feeling very depleted. Everything was coming out of me. And the next day, we had an interview with Swami, and Carolyn was there, the translator. She was a little upset. And Swami said, no, visa problem, they'll come. Russians will come. And then he looked over at Carolyn and said, how is your boyfriend? And Carolyn was angry with him and said, Swami, you know more than I do. You tell me, how is my boyfriend? So Swami looked over at me so sweetly. And he says, I don't know more than you. No, I don't know more than you. I know everything. I know everything. Oh, what a gift. You know, out of forbearance and tedious ups and downs and having your mind be batted around a few times and being depleted, if you hold on, there are these moments of exquisite bliss. Swami told me that he knew everything. I know he knew that what was going on in Russia. He knew what was happening with me. He knows it. Now, this is very hard to believe. You say the words, but we don't believe that he's omnipresent. It doesn't matter if he has a body or no body, or is without any attribute or with all attributes. He's everything. It's hard to comprehend that and really let that settle in and understand he's with you. He's directing you through your life. He's watching you. He's seeing how well you're doing. And he can turn to you and give you the highest blessing. He can do this, and he will do this. He's told us that we're coming through the transition from the Kali Yuga to the Satya Yuga. There's going to be lots of turmoil and upheaval because people who have power and people who have money don't want to give power and money up. They don't want to share. No, they want to hold on and they want to have more power. When selfishness reigns uncountered without blocking it, it can reach horrendous, terrifying proportion and cause harmfulness and fear to anybody. And so it's our duty, it's our deep duty to uphold Dharma, not be frightened of the world, because our Swami is on our side. He's the greatest power and the greatest love that one can imagine. And so with that story, with understanding that Swami knows everything, meaning you, that he's come to give you lots and lots of love. to bring you and me and all of us into his heart. And this is the time he wants to bring us home and for us to melt in his love forever. I pray that we have the wisdom to understand that he really is the door, that life is a process of detachment from ignorance, from attaching to body and sensory material world ignorance, to realize that there's something greater about this life, something eternal within us and within him, and for him to love us and take us into his heart, let us melt and be with him for eternity. And now I'd like to end this talk with a bhajan. Much love to you and all your efforts and your loving relationship with Swami. And Jai Om Jai Sai Ram.
Mahadeva Maheshwara Sai Narayana. Mahadeva Maheshwara Sai Narayana. Mahadeva Maheshwara Sai Narayana. Natanagara Dukha Bhanjana Sai Narayana. Natanagara Dukha Bhanjana Sai Narayana. Natanagara Dukha Bhanjana Sai Narayana. Akhileshwara Sai Narayana. Karunakara Akhileshwara Sai Narayana. Karunakara Akhileshwara Sai Narayana. Ishvara Sai Narayana. Hridayeshvara Partheshvara Sai Narayana. Hridayeshvara Partheshvara Sai